Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Lunar Station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath her. The blue marble looked peaceful from this distance, its surface unmarked by the scars of the resource wars that had ended only 5 years ago. She couldn't see the radiation zones, the abandoned cities, or the massive refugee camps that still dotted 3 continents. From here, humanity's home looked almost innocent. The priority alert that shattered the morning silence changed everything. Admiral, we're receiving an unidentified transmission on the quantum frequency, Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice tight with confusion. It's not from any Earth vessel, ma'am. The signal pattern is completely unknown. Chen frowned, moving toward the communication station. For 3 centuries, humanity had sent signals into the void, hoping for contact with alien civilizations. The silence that followed had been so complete that most people had given up believing they weren't alone. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a figure that made several bridge officers step backward. The being was tall and angular, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. Its large, dark eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably alien, yet the emotion reflected in them was painfully familiar. Desperation. People of Earth, the being spoke, its voice melodic but strained through the universal translator that Chen didn't even know they possessed. I am Ambassador HFY of the Galactic Coalition. We come to you in our darkest hour, seeking help from those we have long feared. Chen's mind raced. The Galactic Coalition. The name implied organization, civilization, an entire community of worlds that had existed without humanity's knowledge. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Ambassador, are you saying there are other intelligent species? The alien's expression, so different yet somehow readable, showed what could only be described as ironic sadness. Many species, Admiral. Dozens of worlds, billions of souls, all now facing extinction. We kept your world isolated for 3 centuries, believing you were too dangerous, too violent for peaceful coexistence. Now we beg for that same violence to save us. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Chen felt the weight of first contact settling on her shoulders, but something in the ambassador's tone suggested there was no time for the careful protocols they had always imagined would govern such a moment. Extinction from what? She asked. The hologram flickered, replaced by images that made even hardened military officers gasp. Massive, organic-looking ships moved through space like living things, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Planets appeared on screen, once green and thriving, now stripped bare and grey. The ships themselves seemed to be consuming everything in their path. The Vorthak. Ambassador HFY's voice continued as the terrible images played. They emerged from the void beyond our galaxy's edge 6 months ago. They are not a species as we understand the term. They are a collective consciousness, a hive mind that exists only to consume and grow. They devour entire worlds, breaking down matter to create more of themselves. Chen watched worlds die in the hologram. Cities that must have taken millennia to build were reduced to nothing in hours. How many worlds have they taken? 17 systems completely consumed. 3 more under attack. Our defensive fleets, the ambassador paused, his voice breaking slightly. We had no true warships, Admiral. The Coalition has known peace for over 1,000 years. Our vessels are designed for exploration, for trade, for research. They were destroyed in the first encounters. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his tactical display. Ma'am, if this is accurate, we're looking at a hostile force that's consumed roughly 15 billion sentient beings in 6 months. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. Chen had commanded forces during the resource wars, had seen entire cities burn, but the scale of destruction the ambassador described was beyond anything in human experience. What exactly are you asking of us, Ambassador? HFY's image returned to the display. Your species has something ours lost long ago. You know war. You understand violence. You have technology designed to kill efficiently. We need warriors, Admiral. We need soldiers who can face the Vorthak and not break. Chen studied the alien's face. You're asking us to fight your war. We're asking you to help us save the galaxy. In return, we offer you what we should have given you centuries ago, a place among the stars. Technology that will heal your world's wounds, knowledge that will advance your civilization by millennia. The Admiral turned to her senior staff. Commander Martinez, her tactical officer, was already running calculations on his personal display. Ma'am, if what we're seeing is accurate, this threat won't stop at the edge of Coalition space. If they've consumed 17 star systems in 6 months, Earth could be in their path eventually. Dr. Elizabeth Vance, the station's xenobiology expert who had been called to the bridge when the transmission began, stepped forward. Admiral, the biological samples he's showing us, these Vorthak organisms appear to be engineered for maximum efficiency. They're not just predators, they're a technological plague. If they reach Earth, we die with everyone else. Chen finished. She looked back at the ambassador. How long do we have? Our best estimates suggest the Vorthak will reach the Coalition's core worlds within 4 months. Earth? Perhaps 8 months after that, assuming they continue at current consumption rates. Chen felt the familiar cold clarity that came in crisis moments. The decision seemed impossible, but she had learned during the resource wars that impossible decisions often had obvious answers if you could set aside everything but survival. Ambassador, I need to consult with Earth's leadership. How can we contact you? We have a delegation waiting at the edge of your solar system. They carry complete intelligence files on the Vorthak, as well as Coalition technology that can be adapted to your existing military infrastructure. Waiting? Commander Martinez asked. How long have you been watching us? Kethvar's expression showed what might have been shame. Since your first nuclear weapons test in 1945, we established monitoring stations to ensure you did not develop the capability to threaten other worlds. We thought we were protecting the galaxy from humanity. Now we pray that we were wrong to fear you. Admiral Chen made a decision that would change human history. Permission granted for your delegation to enter Earth space. We'll meet at coordinates I'm transmitting now. Ambassador, I want you to understand something. If we do this, if humanity commits to this fight, we don't do anything halfway. When humans go to war, we go to win. That is exactly what we are counting on, Admiral. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chen looked around at her officers, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. First contact with alien life. A galactic civilization under threat of extinction. Humanity being asked to become the galaxy's military force after centuries of isolation. Lieutenant Torres, get me a direct line to President Morrison. Commander Martinez, I want our best tactical teams prepped for a briefing in 2 hours. Vance, start thinking about how we integrate alien technology with our existing weapon systems. As her staff hurried to comply, Chen remained at the observation window, looking down at Earth. The blue marble still looked peaceful, but she knew that was about to change forever. Humanity had always been good at one thing above all others, surviving through violence when all other options were exhausted. The galaxy was about to learn why that had terrified them for so long. 3 hours later, the alien delegation's ship appeared on Lunar Station's sensors. It was beautiful, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed almost musical. It was also completely defenseless, designed for diplomacy and exploration rather than war. When the airlock opened and Ambassador Kethvar stepped aboard, followed by 6 other Coalition species, Chen got her first real look at the galaxy humanity was being asked to save. The beings were diverse beyond anything science fiction had imagined. The crystalline form of a Zerathai, whose body seemed carved from living gemstone. A Morkai, whose tentacled form moved with fluid grace. A Drev, whose insectoid appearance was offset by gentle, intelligent eyes. All of them looked at the human officers with a mixture of hope and barely concealed fear. Welcome to Lunar Station, Chen said formally. We have a lot to discuss. Ambassador Kethvar nodded. Indeed. Admiral, I must warn you. What we are about to show you regarding the Vorthak may disturb your people. The recordings we carry, Ambassador, Chen interrupted gently. Humanity has been disturbing itself for centuries. Show us what we're fighting. The next 6 hours changed everything. The Coalition's intelligence files painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humans had ever faced. The Vorthak weren't driven by ideology, territory, or resources in any recognizable sense. They existed only to consume and replicate, turning everything they encountered into more of themselves. But as Chen watched the tactical recordings of Coalition fleets being destroyed, she began to see patterns. The Vorthak were efficient, but they followed predictable attack strategies. They were adaptive, but they required time to analyze and counter new threats. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that understood warfare as a science rather than a necessity. They're ships, she said to Dr. Vance during a break in the briefings. They're biological, but they follow formation patterns. They have weak points. The Coalition species never learned to think like predators. Doctor, Vance replied, they see war as an aberration. But humans, we turned it into an art form. Chen looked at the star charts showing Vorthak expansion. We can do this. but we'll need to do it our way. When the briefings concluded, Ambassador Cathvar approached her privately. Admiral, I must ask, your planet has just emerged from a major war. Your people are still rebuilding. Why would humanity risk everything for strangers? Chen considered the question. Because if we don't, we all die anyway. But more than that, she gestured toward the observation windows where Earth hung in space. Humans have always been at our best when we're protecting something. Give us something to fight for, and we'll fight harder than anyone thought possible. The ambassador studied her face. We had hoped to find warriors. I think instead we have found something far more dangerous. Heroes. As the delegation prepared to return to their ship with humanity's preliminary agreement to join the fight, Chen received one final piece of information that changed everything. A coded message from deep space monitors, decoded by Coalition equipment, showed the latest Vorthak movements. They had accelerated their consumption rate. Earth now had 6 months, not 8. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was running out of time to prepare for it. Standing on the observation deck as the alien ship departed, Admiral Chen activated her personal communicator. Get me Colonel Richards at Camp Pendleton. Tell him to prep the 3rd Marine Division for immediate deployment. Tell him we're going to war, but not against anyone from Earth. As she spoke, transport ships were already being retrofitted in orbital shipyards, human weapons were being adapted to alien technology, and across Earth, recruitment centers were being flooded by volunteers who had watched the alien transmissions and understood what was at stake. Humanity was going to war among the stars. For the first time in their violent history, they would fight not for conquest or resources, but for the survival of every intelligent species in the galaxy. The peaceful coalition was about to learn why they had feared humanity for 3 centuries. And the Vorthak were about to discover why that fear had been justified. Colonel Marcus Richards had seen enough war to last 3 lifetimes. The scars running down his left arm were souvenirs from the siege of Cairo during the resource wars, and the cybernetic implant behind his right ear was a reminder of the bombing of New Singapore. At 52, he should have been thinking about retirement, not preparing for humanity's first interstellar conflict. Standing in the briefing room at Camp Pendleton, watching his senior staff study holographic displays of alien technology and enemy bioships, he felt like he was planning for a war from a fever dream. All right, people, he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. I know this looks like science fiction, but as of 72 hours ago, it became our reality. Major Thompson, what's our current status? Major Lisa Thompson. His operations officer stood and gestured to the display. Sir, we've got 2,000 Marines volunteering for the first deployment. Every soldier who watched those alien transmissions wants a piece of this fight. Problem is, we've only got transportation for 800. The coalition ships? Richards asked. Beautiful, fast, and completely unarmed. Captain Jake Morrison, the unit's intelligence officer, replied. They're basically flying passenger vessels. We're retrofitting them with Earth weapons, but it's like mounting machine guns on a cruise ship. Dr. Sarah Kim, the civilian scientist assigned to help integrate human and alien technology, approached the holographic display. The good news is that coalition technology is incredibly advanced in areas that complement our capabilities. Their shields are phenomenal, their power sources are clean and efficient, and their medical technology can heal injuries we'd consider fatal. What's the bad news? Richards asked, though he suspected he already knew. They have no concept of military tactics. Their idea of a defensive strategy is to retreat and hope the enemy doesn't follow. They've never developed anything resembling military doctrine because they've never needed it. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, Richards' senior NCO, shook her head. Sir, I've been reading their combat reports. These Vorthak things hit their fleets and the coalition ships just scattered. No formation fighting, no coordinated defense, no covering fire for retreating vessels. They're not cowards. Doctor, Kim said quickly. They just don't think like warriors. It's like asking a surgeon to fight a boxer. They have all the technical skill in the world, but none of the mindset. Richard studied the tactical displays showing Vorthak attack patterns. The alien swarm moved with frightening efficiency, but he was beginning to see something his coalition allies had missed. They're predictable, he said finally. Sir? Major Thompson asked. Look at these attack formations. The Vorthak hit the same way every time. Massive frontal assault, overwhelming numbers, consume everything in their path. They've never had to adapt their tactics because nothing has ever been able to resist them effectively. Captain Morrison leaned forward. You're thinking they don't know how to handle a real fight. I'm thinking they've never faced an enemy that shoots back effectively. Richards called up a new display showing human naval tactics from the resource wars. We spent 3 centuries learning how to kill each other efficiently. We know how to make every shot count, how to use terrain, how to coordinate complex operations under fire. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just being asked to provide soldiers, they were being asked to teach the galaxy how to fight a war. "What's our timeline?" Richards asked. "First deployment ships out in 96 hours, Thompson replied. "Admiral Chen wants us at the Coalition Fortress world of Kepler 442b within 2 weeks. That's where the Coalition is making their stand." Dr. Kim activated another hologram showing a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by a massive space station complex. Kepler 442b is home to 12 billion Coalition citizens from 17 different species. It's their military command center, such as it is, and their last major population center outside the core worlds. How long until the Vorthak reach it? Coalition estimates say 6 weeks. But those estimates have been wrong before. Always too optimistic. Richards felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. 800 Marines against an alien swarm that had consumed entire star systems. The odds were insane, but he'd faced bad odds before. "All right, here's what we're going to do. Major Thompson, I want our people trained on Coalition technology within 72 hours. Focus on the shield generators and power systems. We'll fight with our weapons, but we need to understand their tech." "Yes, sir." "Captain Morrison, I want detailed analysis of every Vorthak engagement on record. Look for patterns, weaknesses, anything we can exploit. These things might be alien, but they follow biological imperatives. Everything biological has vulnerabilities." "Understood, sir." "Sergeant Santos, work with Dr. Kim on integrating our weapons with Coalition ships. I want our people to be able to fight effectively in their environment." As his staff dispersed to their tasks, Richards remained behind, studying the star charts. 6 weeks to prepare for a battle that would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars or died with everyone else. 3 days later, the first joint training exercises began. Richards watched from the observation deck as human Marines worked alongside Coalition soldiers for the first time. The cultural differences were staggering. The Thalnari, a species resembling tall, graceful insects, moved with perfect coordination but had no concept of individual initiative. When their formation was disrupted, they stood motionless, waiting for orders rather than adapting to the situation. The Korthak, thick-skinned humanoids from a high-gravity world, were incredibly strong and durable, but had never learned to use cover because their homeworld had no predators capable of threatening them. The Zerathi, crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic resonance, were brilliant tacticians in theory, but had never applied their knowledge in actual combat. "This is going to be interesting," Sergeant Santos said, joining him at the window. "The aliens are treating this like a training exercise. Our people are treating it like preparation for war." Richards watched as Private Johnson demonstrated room-clearing techniques to a group of Coalition soldiers. The young Marine moved with lethal efficiency, checking corners, using cover, never exposing himself unnecessarily. The aliens followed his movements but clearly didn't understand the underlying principles. "They're copying our actions without understanding our thinking," he said. Dr. Kim approached with a tablet full of data. "Colonel, I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of Coalition species. They're genuinely pacifistic, not just politically but biologically. Most of them have evolutionary backgrounds as prey species or cooperative herbivores. The concept of aggressive competition is literally foreign to their thinking. And humans? Persistence hunters and pack predators. We evolved to chase down prey over long distances and work together to kill things bigger than ourselves. We're designed for warfare at a genetic level." Richards nodded grimly, "which explains why they quarantined us for 3 centuries, and why they need us now." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Ambassador Kethvar arrived at the training facility with an urgent message from Coalition Command. "Colonel Richards," the ambassador said, his melodic voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The Vorthak have accelerated their advance. They will reach Kepler 442b in 3 weeks, not 6. Richards felt his stomach drop. 3 weeks? That barely gives us time to get there. There is more. Our deep space monitors have detected a second Vorthak fleet moving toward the core worlds. If both attacks succeed, game over," Richards finished. "How many ships in the second fleet?" "Twice the size of the force approaching Kepler 442b. The colonel looked around the briefing room at his staff. 3 weeks to get 800 Marines across interstellar space and into position to fight an alien swarm that had already consumed 17 star systems. The mission was shifting from difficult to impossible. "Ambassador, What's the Coalition's plan for defending their core worlds? Kethvar's expression showed despair. Evacuation. They are preparing to abandon their capital and flee to the Outer Rim. That won't work, Major Thompson said. If the Vorthak take the core worlds, they'll have the resources to pursue any survivors. This becomes a war of attrition that the Coalition can't win. Richard studied the tactical displays, his mind racing through possibilities. What if we split our forces? Send half to Kepler, 442B, and half to defend the core worlds. 400 Marines against each fleet? Captain Morrison shook his head. Sir, we don't have enough people for one engagement, let alone two. Doctor. Kim stepped forward. There might be another option. The Coalition has been working on a project they call the Unity Protocol. It's a way to link multiple species' technologies and capabilities through quantum entanglement. Explain, Richard said. Imagine if human tactical thinking could be directly transmitted to Coalition forces in real time. If our people could coordinate with alien soldiers across multiple battle zones simultaneously, it would effectively multiply our force presence. Ambassador Kethvar looked surprised. Dr. Kim, the Unity Protocol is highly experimental. It has never been tested in combat conditions. Nothing about this situation is normal, Richards pointed out. How quickly can we implement it? The hardware can be ready within days, Dr. Kim replied. The question is whether human neural patterns are compatible with Coalition communication systems. Only one way to find out. Richards turned to Sergeant Santos. I need volunteers for an experimental procedure that might let them coordinate with alien soldiers telepathically during combat. Santos grinned. Sir, if you'd said that a week ago, I'd have recommended psychiatric evaluation. Now? When do we start? The next 72 hours blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. Human volunteers underwent neural implant procedures that connected their minds to Coalition communication networks. The results were extraordinary and terrifying. Staff Sergeant David Park, the first successful test subject, could suddenly perceive battlefield information from dozens of Coalition soldiers simultaneously. More importantly, Coalition forces linked to his implant began moving with human tactical awareness, using cover instinctively and coordinating their actions with lethal efficiency. It's like having 100 extra sets of eyes and hands, Park reported after the first full test. But the information overload is intense. I can feel every alien soldier's emotions, their fears, their confusion. It's overwhelming. Doctor, Kim monitored the neural feedback carefully. We're essentially creating a hybrid command structure. Human tactical thinking directing Coalition numbers and technology. Richards watched the test exercises with growing hope. Coalition soldiers linked to human coordinators fought with a ferocity and effectiveness they had never displayed. But the cost was becoming apparent. The human volunteers were pushing their neural systems to dangerous limits. How many people can handle this level of neural integration? He asked Dr. Carlton. Kim, maybe 50, maximum. And we'll need to rotate them constantly to prevent neural burnout. 50 human minds linked to thousands of Coalition soldiers across multiple battlefields. It was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Ambassador Kethvar approached him as the final preparations were completed. Colonel, I must ask, are your people truly willing to risk their minds for strangers? The neural integration carries significant dangers. Richards looked at the volunteers preparing for departure. Young men and women who had signed up to defend Earth and now found themselves preparing to save the galaxy. Ambassador, you still don't understand humans very well. We don't just fight for survival, we fight for principles. For the idea that intelligent life shouldn't be consumed by mindless hunger.
Even when the cost is so high? Especially when the cost is so high.
The transport ships launched 2 days ahead of schedule, carrying 800 Marines and 50 neural integration volunteers toward their first interstellar battle. As Richards watched Earth shrink behind them, he reflected on how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, humanity's biggest concern was rebuilding after the resource wars. Now they were the galaxy's last hope against extinction. The Coalition had begged for assistance and received something they never expected, a species that treated warfare as both science and art, who could turn necessary violence into strategic brilliance. Soon the Vorthak would learn why the peaceful species of the galaxy had feared humanity for 3 centuries. They were about to face an enemy that didn't just fight to survive, but fought to win, no matter the cost. The smoke was already rising across distant battlefields. Soon, human Marines would emerge through that smoke, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first thing Staff Sergeant David Park noticed when the transport ships dropped out of hyperspace was the smell. Even through the ship's environmental systems, Even through his neural implants that were buzzing with coalition communication traffic, he could smell death. Kepler 442b hung in space ahead of them like a wounded animal. The beautiful blue-green world he had seen in briefings was now streaked with brown and grey patches, where Vorthak bioships had begun preliminary consumption of the planet's surface. Massive organic vessels, each one the size of a city, moved through the system like sharks circling wounded prey. "Jesus Christ," whispered Private Martinez from the transport seat beside him. "How many of those things are there?" Park's neural implants automatically connected him to the coalition sensor networks, flooding his mind with tactical data. The numbers that flowed through his consciousness made his stomach clench. 87 capital ships, 340, two smaller vessels, approximately 50,000 individual bioforms capable of atmospheric operation. "Park," Colonel Richard's voice cut through the neural chatter from the command ship. "How are you holding up with the data flow?" The staff sergeant closed his eyes, focusing on filtering the massive stream of information pouring into his brain from coalition sensors, communication arrays, and the minds of panicked alien soldiers across the system. "It's manageable, sir. But the coalition forces are in full retreat. They've lost orbital superiority and most of their defensive positions." Through the neural link, Park could feel the terror and confusion of coalition soldiers who had never faced an enemy like this. The Felnari ground forces were breaking formation and fleeing. The Korthak heavy infantry were holding their positions but dying in droves because they didn't understand the concept of tactical withdrawal. The Zerathi were trying to coordinate a defense but couldn't get other species to follow their commands. "What's our drop zone status?" Richards asked. Park accessed the surface tactical networks, his consciousness briefly merging with a Morkai scout trapped in the ruins of the planet's capital city. Through alien eyes, he saw Vorthak bioforms moving through the streets like a living flood, dissolving everything organic they touched and incorporating the matter into their own biomass. "Primary landing zones are compromised," he reported. "The Vorthak have overrun the main population centers. Coalition forces are scattered across the northern continent, but they're not coordinating their retreat." "Then we changed the plan," Richard said. "Instead of reinforcing their defensive positions, we're going to teach them how to counterattack." The 8 transport ships carrying human forces split into 4 groups, each heading for a different section of the planet. Park's group, designated Alpha Company, was assigned to link up with a coalition force trapped in the mountains east of the capital. As their transport entered atmosphere, Park activated the Unity Protocol, establishing neural links with the coalition soldiers they were approaching. Immediately, his consciousness exploded with alien thoughts and sensations. He was Lieutenant Keth Sim, a Felnari officer watching his soldiers die as Vorthak bioforms swarmed their position. He was Engineer Voskar, a Korthak trying to repair damaged equipment, while bioacid rain dissolved everything around him. He was Scout Zaralin, a Zerathi reconnaissance specialist hiding in caves while the enemy systematically consumed her homeworld. Through dozens of alien perspectives, Park experienced their terror, their confusion, their desperation. But overlaying it all was something else: hope. For the first time in months of retreating, the coalition forces were receiving tactical guidance from minds that understood warfare. "Alpha Company, this is Control," Park said, his voice being transmitted simultaneously through coalition communication networks to every alien soldier in the operational area. "New orders coming through. We're going to stop running and start fighting." The transport landed in a valley 5 kilometers from the coalition position. As the Marines disembarked, Park maintained his neural connections while coordinating the link-up. Through alien eyes, he watched Vorthak bioforms moving through the mountains, following the energy signatures of Coalition technology. 60 enemy contacts approaching Coalition position from 3 directions. He reported to Captain Lisa Chen, Alpha Company's commanding officer. "They're using the valleys to channel their advance, standard swarm tactics." Captain Chen studied her tactical display. "They're treating this like every other engagement. Overwhelming force, direct assault. They don't know we're here yet." Park nodded, filtering tactical data through his implants. "The Coalition forces have been retreating for so long, they've forgotten they have weapons that can actually hurt these things. Time to remind them," Chen said. "Park, can you coordinate a simultaneous assault through your neural link?" "Yes, ma'am. But the Coalition soldiers are terrified. They've been losing for months. They don't believe they can win. Then show them how humans fight." The next 30 minutes changed the course of the war. Park established direct neural connections with the Coalition forces officers, sharing not just tactical information but human combat psychology. Through the Unity Protocol, Alien soldiers suddenly understood concepts they had never experienced. Aggressive pursuit, calculated risk-taking, the use of violence as a precise tool, rather than chaotic destruction. Lieutenant Kethsim found herself moving her Thelnari soldiers into flanking positions, something her species had never developed tactically. Engineer Voskar began using his repair equipment to create improvised explosives, turning defensive tools into offensive weapons. Scout Zaralyn used her knowledge of cave systems to guide Coalition forces in a complex underground assault. When the Vorthak bioforms reached the Coalition position, they expected to find panicked defenders fleeing in disorder. Instead, they walked into a carefully coordinated ambush. Coalition energy weapons previously used in desperate defensive fire now targeted specific weak points Park had identified in Vorthak anatomy. The bioform's own predictable assault patterns were turned against them as human tactical thinking guided alien soldiers through maneuvers that maximized damage while minimizing casualties. Target the neural clusters, Park transmitted through the network. His consciousness split across dozens of alien minds. Third segment from the head, right side. Those energy bursts you're seeing aren't weapons, they're communication nodes. The first Vorthak bioform to fall sent shockwaves through the enemy formation. The creatures had consumed 17 star systems without ever losing a significant engagement. The concept of tactical defeat was literally foreign to their collective consciousness. Captain Chen led the human Marines in a direct assault on the largest bioform, a creature the size of a city bus that served as the local swarm coordinator. Using Coalition shield generators and human weapons, the Marines carved through bioforms that had seemed invincible just hours before. "These things aren't as tough as they look," Sergeant Rodriguez called out, as his squad's railguns punched through bio-armor that Coalition weapons had barely scratched. "They're built for overwhelming numbers, not individual combat effectiveness." Park, coordinating the battle through his neural links, began to see the larger pattern. "Captain, the Vorthak are adapting to our tactics faster than expected. They're learning from each engagement." Through the Unity protocol, he watched enemy bioforms changing their approach in real time, developing countermeasures to human tactical doctrines. The collective consciousness was analyzing human combat patterns and adjusting accordingly. "How fast?" Chen asked, using her sidearm to finish off a wounded bioform. "Fast enough that what works here might not work at the next engagement," Park replied. "But I'm learning too. Every time they adapt, I can see their thought processes. They're predictable in their unpredictability." The battle for the mountain position lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Coalition forces had achieved their first major victory against the Vorthak. More importantly, they had learned that the enemy could be beaten, that the cost was becoming apparent. Park's neural implants were operating at dangerous levels, processing tactical data from thousands of sources simultaneously. He could feel his human consciousness beginning to fragment under the strain of managing alien minds. "Park, we need to pull you back." Dr. Kim's voice came through his communication implant. "Your neural activity is off the charts. You're risking permanent damage." "Negative," Park replied, watching through alien eyes as Vorthak reinforcements moved toward their position. "The Coalition forces are starting to understand how to fight, but they still need coordination. If I disconnect now, they'll revert to their old patterns." Quote, Captain Chen made the decision for him. "Staff Sergeant, that's a direct order. Transfer command protocols to the Coalition officers and disconnect from the Unity protocol." Park reluctantly began the process of transferring his tactical coordination to Lieutenant Kethsim and the other Coalition officers. As the neural connections faded, he felt something unexpected. The alien soldiers were retaining some of the human tactical thinking, even without the direct link. "Captain," he said, collapsing into a supply crate as the neural strain hit him, "I think we just taught them how to be warriors." The success at the mountain position was being replicated across Kepler. 442b. Human Marines working with Coalition forces were achieving victories that had seemed impossible weeks before, but the victories came at a cost. The 50 human volunteers operating Unity protocol implants were pushing their neural systems to the breaking point. Colonel Richards, coordinating the overall battle from orbit, received reports that made him proud and terrified simultaneously. Human tactical thinking was spreading through Coalition forces like a virus, teaching peaceful species how to wage effective warfare. But the psychological toll on both humans and aliens was enormous. "Sir," Major Thompson reported from the tactical center, "we're getting reports from all 4 battle groups. Enemy resistance is collapsing in coordinated areas, but they're adapting to our tactics faster than anticipated." Richards studied the planetary tactical display. The Vorthak were learning, but they were also losing. For the first time in their expansion, they were facing an enemy that could match their adaptability with superior tactical thinking. What's our casualty report? 12 Marines killed, 34 wounded. Coalition losses are down 90% from previous engagements. But sir, the neural integration volunteers are showing signs of severe psychological strain. Richards nodded grimly. They were winning the tactical battle, but risking the minds of their people. Time for Phase 2. Signal the fleet. Begin orbital bombardment of confirmed Vorthak bioship positions. The next phase of the battle moved to space. Coalition ships, previously used only for desperate retreat, now coordinated with human tactical thinking to engage enemy vessels directly. The results were spectacular. Vorthak bioships designed to overwhelm and consume found themselves outmaneuvered by vessels they had previously dominated. Coalition shields, previously used defensively, now protected ships as they closed to optimal firing range. Coalition weapons, previously fired in desperation, now targeted specific vulnerabilities identified by human tactical analysis. But the enemy was learning. Each engagement taught the Vorthak collective consciousness more about human warfare. They began developing countermeasures, new bioforms designed specifically to counter human tactics. As the battle for Kepler 442b entered its second day, the larger war was becoming clear. This wasn't just about saving one planet. It was about proving that the Vorthak could be beaten. Every victory here would be transmitted across the galaxy, giving hope to other coalition worlds and teaching them how to fight. The smoke was rising from 100 battlefields across the planet's surface. And emerging through that smoke, coordinating alien soldiers through neural links that bridged species barriers, were human Marines who had learned to think like a galaxy. The Vorthak had faced their first real defeat, but they were adapting faster than anyone had anticipated, and the true test of human tactical superiority was yet to come. As Staff Sergeant Park recovered from neural strain in the field medical station, he could still feel echoes of alien thoughts in his mind. The Coalition soldiers were changing, becoming something new. Peaceful species learning the art of war from humanity's most violent children. The galaxy would never be the same. The question was whether it would survive long enough to appreciate the transformation. The Coalition core worlds were burning. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the CNV Determination as massive Vorthak bioships descended upon Nexus Prime, the Coalition's capital world. The planet housed 40 billion souls from across the galaxy, representing nearly half of the Coalition's total population. If it fell, the war was over. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Long-range sensors are showing 237 Vorthak capital ships entering the system. That's more than twice what our intelligence predicted." Chen studied the tactical display, her mind racing through calculations that all led to the same conclusion. They were outnumbered by a factor that made victory impossible through conventional warfare. The 50 human volunteers with neural integration implants were already showing severe strain from coordinating the defense of Kepler 442b. Now they were being asked to coordinate the defense of an entire star system. Status on our Coalition allies? Scattered across 12 defensive positions around the planet. Commander Martinez replied. Total of 800 Coalition ships, but they're armed with weapons designed for exploration, not warfare. Most of their captains have never been in combat before yesterday.
Dr. Whiteear.
Elizabeth Vance, now serving as the integration specialist for the Core World Defense, approached the Admiral with troubling news. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from the neural integration teams. The volunteers are experiencing cascade failures in their implant systems. The data load from coordinating system-wide defense is beyond human neural capacity." Chen felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "How many have we lost?" 7 volunteers have suffered complete neural shutdown in the last 6 hours. Another 12 are showing signs of irreversible brain damage. At our current rate of attrition, we'll be down to 0 operational integrators within 24 hours. The Admiral looked around the bridge at her crew. Young faces that had volunteered for humanity's first interstellar war, now facing odds that made their mission suicidal. "Options, we could withdraw," Martinez suggested quietly. "Pull back to the outer rim, try to evacuate as many Coalition civilians as possible." "That would mean abandoning 40 billion people, Dr. Sikora," Vance pointed out. "And the Vorthak would have the resources of the core worlds to expand even faster." Chen activated her communication system. "Colonel Richards, are you receiving this transmission?" Richards' voice came through from the surface of Kepler.
442b, where human forces were still mopping up the last Vorthak resistance.
Yes, ma'am. We're monitoring the core world situation. I need an honest assessment. Can your people handle coordination for both theaters simultaneously? There was a long pause before Richards responded. Admiral, my neural integration volunteers are already operating beyond safe parameters. Staff Sergeant Park collapsed into a coma 2 hours ago, and he was our most stable operator. If we try to coordinate core world defense from here, we'll lose everyone, Chen finished. Understood. She looked at the tactical display again, watching Vorthak bioships move into assault formation around Nexus Prime. 2 days ago, humanity hadn't known intelligent alien life existed. Now they were responsible for the survival of galactic civilization. Admiral, Doctor, Vance said quietly, there might be another option. What if we don't coordinate the defense remotely? Chen turned to her. Explain. The Unity Protocol was designed for remote coordination because we assumed coalition forces would be scattered across multiple worlds. But if we can get our neural integration volunteers physically into the core world defense network, directly interfaced with coalition command systems, the data load would still be massive, Martinez pointed out. But it would be direct interface, not transmitted across interstellar distances. We might be able to handle the processing requirements without killing our people. Chen studied the tactical situation. The Vorthak fleet was still 4 hours out from Nexus Prime. It would take 3 hours to get human forces to the planet's defense network. How many volunteers would we need? For system-wide coordination, 20 minimum. Optimally 30. Chen activated her fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. I'm requesting volunteers for a mission that will require direct neural interface with alien technology. The procedure carries significant risk of permanent brain damage or death. We need 30 volunteers within the next 30 minutes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the fleet reported more volunteers than they could accept. 30 minutes later, the fastest coalition ships in the fleet were racing toward Nexus Prime, carrying human volunteers who might save the galaxy or die trying. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was among the volunteers. At 26, she was the youngest officer in the fleet, but her neural patterns had shown exceptional compatibility with coalition technology. As their transport ship approached Nexus Prime, she tried not to think about Staff Sergeant Park's current condition. First time seeing a coalition core world? Asked Commander Jake Morrison, the senior officer leading their volunteer group.
Kim looked through the viewport at Nexus Prime and gasped.
The planet was a work of art. Massive crystalline cities rose from perfectly maintained continents. Space elevators connected the surface to orbital habitats that housed billions. The entire system was a testament to what peaceful cooperation could achieve across millennia, and it was all about to be consumed by alien horrors. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Yeah, Morrison replied. That's what we're fighting for. The right of intelligent species to build something beautiful, instead of just surviving. Their ship docked with the Coalition's primary defense station, a massive structure that coordinated planetary shields and orbital weapons. As they disembarked, Kim got her first close look at Coalition technology designed for warfare. It was impressive but deeply flawed. The weapons were incredibly powerful but lacked targeting systems sophisticated enough to engage fast-moving enemies. The shields could deflect enormous amounts of energy, but had gaps that any military engineer would recognize immediately. The coordination systems were brilliant, but assumed that all participants would follow orders without question. This is amazing technology, Morrison said as they were led to the neural integration chamber. But it's designed by people who never learned to think like warriors. The integration process was unlike anything Kim had experienced during training. Instead of connecting to the limited senses of a single battlefield, her consciousness exploded across an entire star system. She could perceive through thousands of coalition senses simultaneously, feel the fear of billions of civilians, and access computational power that dwarfed anything on Earth. But she could also feel the Vorthak approaching. The collective consciousness of the swarm was unlike any intelligence she had ever encountered. It wasn't evil or malicious, it was simply hungry. The Vorthak experienced existence as a constant need to consume and grow, and every living thing in the galaxy was simply food to be processed. Integration complete. Doctor? Vance's voice came through the communication system. How are you feeling, Lieutenant? Kim tested her new capabilities, accessing coalition defense networks and coordinating with the other human volunteers who were linking into the system. Functional, ma'am. The processing power available here is incredible. I can coordinate fleet movements across the entire system simultaneously. Through her enhanced consciousness, she could perceive the Coalition fleet preparing for battle. 800 ships positioned around Nexus Prime, their crews terrified but determined. She could feel their fear, but she could also implant tactical knowledge directly into their minds. All volunteers, this is Morrison. The commander's voice came through the neural network. Begin tactical coordination. Remember, we're not just fighting for this system. We're teaching the galaxy how to win. The battle began 4 hours later when the Vorthak fleet reached the outer system. Kim, coordinating 36 Coalition ships from her position in the defense network, watched through multiple sensor perspectives as bioships moved into attack formation. The first engagement was a revelation. Coalition ships, guided by human tactical thinking transmitted through neural links, fought with precision and coordination they had never displayed before. Instead of scattering when faced with superior numbers, they formed mutually supporting formations that maximized their firepower while minimizing casualties. Target their coordination nodes. Kim transmitted directly into the minds of Coalition ship captains. Third bioship from the left, that pulsing section, is their fleet command center. Coalition energy weapons, previously used in desperate defensive fire, now struck with surgical precision. The targeted bioship convulsed as its neural networks were severed, sending chaotic signals through the Vorthak formation. But the enemy adapted quickly. Within minutes, the collective consciousness had analyzed human tactical patterns and begun developing countermeasures. Bioships changed formation. New command structures emerged, and the Vorthak began targeting Coalition ships with weapons specifically designed to counter human defensive strategies. They're learning faster than we anticipated. Morrison's voice came through the neural link. Kim, how's your data processing holding up? Kim assessed her neural load. The strain of coordinating fleet movements while processing tactical data from across the system was enormous, but the direct interface was more efficient than remote coordination. Within parameters, sir. But I'm seeing something strange in the Vorthak patterns. She shared her observations through the neural network. The Vorthak collective consciousness was learning human tactics, but it was also becoming more individual. As it adapted to human strategic thinking, it was developing something resembling distinct personalities among its bioship commanders. They're becoming more like us, she realized. The collective consciousness is fracturing into individual units as it learns human warfare. Morrison's response carried implications that chilled her. Which means they're becoming more dangerous. Individual initiative combined with collective resources. The battle intensified as both sides adapted to each other. Coalition ships, guided by human tactical thinking, achieved victories that would have been impossible weeks before. But the Vorthak were learning to fight like humans while retaining their overwhelming numbers. Casualties mounted on both sides. Coalition ships were destroyed, their crews dying as they learned the true cost of warfare. But for every Coalition vessel lost, human-guided tactics were eliminating multiple Vorthak bioships. Kim felt each death through her neural connections. Coalition officers dying as they finally understood what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. Human volunteers suffering neural burnout as they pushed their minds beyond human limitations. But she also felt something else. The Coalition species were changing. Each battle taught them not just tactics but the psychology of warfare. They were learning to think like predators, to embrace necessary violence, to become warriors. All units, this is Admiral Chen, came the transmission from the command fleet. We're detecting a second Vorthak force approaching from the galactic rim. They've got reinforcements. Through her enhanced perception, Kim could see them, another 100 bioships moving towards Nexus Prime. The Coalition defense was already stretched to its limits. Additional enemy forces would overwhelm their positions, but as she watched the tactical display, Kim realized something that changed everything. The approaching bioships were moving in formation patterns identical to the ones already in the system. The Vorthak collective consciousness wasn't just learning human tactics. It was teaching them to its other forces. Commander Morrison, she transmitted through the neural link. The reinforcements are using the same adapted tactics as the primary force. They've shared their learning across their entire species. Which means? Kim ran tactical projections through her enhanced consciousness, accessing Coalition computational resources to model the implications. What she found made her blood run cold. The Vorthak aren't just adapting to human warfare, they're becoming better at it than we are. They're taking our tactical innovations and perfecting them with collective intelligence. The war had just entered a new phase. Humanity had taught the galaxy how to fight. but they had also taught their enemies. The Vorthak were no longer just a mindless swarm. They were becoming a military force that combined human strategic thinking with alien efficiency. As the reinforcement fleet approached Nexus Prime, Kim realized that humanity's greatest strength, their ability to innovate in warfare, had become their greatest vulnerability. They had created an enemy that could outlearn and outfight them. The smoke was rising from battlefields across the galaxy, and emerging through it were not just human marines but alien warriors who had learned to think like humans. The question was whether they had learned quickly enough, and whether humanity could stay ahead of an enemy that was becoming more human with every battle. The war for the galaxy was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The final battle for galactic civilization began in the most unlikely place, the Neural Integration Chamber aboard the CNV Determination, where Lieutenant Sarah Kim was dying. Her vitals were failing as her brain processed tactical data from 3-star systems simultaneously. Through her fading consciousness, she coordinated the defense of Nexus Prime, guided coalition fleets at Kepler 442b, and monitored Vorthak movements across the Outer Rim. The strain was killing her, but disconnecting would mean the collapse of human coalition coordination across the entire warfront. "Lieutenant, your neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Vance said, monitoring Kim's vital signs from the medical station. "You're going to suffer complete brain death within the next hour if we don't pull you out." Kim's response came through the neural link, her physical voice too weak to be heard.
Can't disconnect.
The Vorthak are coordinating a 3-pronged assault. If I lose the tactical overview, we lose everything. Through her enhanced consciousness, she could perceive the true scope of what humanity and the coalition were facing. The Vorthak had learned human warfare too well. They were no longer a mindless swarm, but a military force that combined collective intelligence with individual initiative. Worse, they were teaching these lessons to Vorthak forces across the galaxy through their biological communication networks. Admiral Chen arrived at the medical station, her face grim. "Kim, I need a strategic assessment. Can we win this war?" The lieutenant's consciousness was scattered across dozens of battle zones, but she focused enough to respond. "No, ma'am, not the way we're fighting it. The Vorthak learn faster than we can innovate. Every tactic we develop, they perfect and distribute to their entire species within hours. Then what do you recommend?" Kim's answer came after a long pause, during which her neural implants processed tactical data from across 3-star systems. "We changed the nature of the war. Stop trying to outfight them and start trying to outthink them." Admiral Chen frowned. "Explain." "The Vorthak collective consciousness is their strength, but it's also their weakness. They share everything instantly, knowledge, tactics, experiences, but they also share vulnerabilities." Through the neural link, Kim transmitted a tactical analysis that made everyone in the medical station step back in shock. She had identified a pattern in Vorthak behavior that no one had noticed before. "They're not just learning our tactics," she continued. "They're learning our psychology, our aggressive impulses, our individual initiative, our willingness to sacrifice for strategic gain. The more human they become, the more they develop something they never had before: internal conflict." Dr. Van studied Kim's analysis. "You're saying the collective consciousness is fracturing?" "I'm saying we can make it fracture. The Vorthak bioships that have fought us the longest are developing distinct personalities, individual desires that conflict with collective goals. We can exploit that." Admiral Chen activated her fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Prepare for emergency tactical briefing in 30 minutes. We're changing our entire strategic approach." The plan that emerged from that briefing was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Instead of trying to defeat the Vorthak through superior tactics, humanity would attempt something unprecedented. They would try to teach the enemy to defeat itself. Colonel Richards, still coordinating ground operations on Kepler 442b, was the first to understand the implications. "Admiral, you're talking about psychological warfare on a species-wide scale. We'd be trying to introduce human concepts like doubt, individual ambition, and strategic disagreement into a collective consciousness." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Chen replied. "Lieutenant Kim has identified bioships that are already showing signs of individual decision-making. If we can reinforce those tendencies, we could fragment their collective consciousness," Dr. Vance finished. "Turn their greatest strength into a weakness." The implementation required unprecedented cooperation between human neural integration volunteers and coalition forces. Instead of simply coordinating attacks, the volunteers would transmit specifically designed psychological patterns during combat, encouraging individual Vorthak bioships to act independently of collective directives. Staff Sergeant Park, recently recovered from his neural coma, volunteered to lead the effort despite the risks. "Ma'am, with respect, this is what we trained for. Not just to fight aliens, but to understand them well enough to defeat them." The first test came during the renewed assault on Nexus Prime. As Vorthak bioships attacked Coalition positions, human neural integration volunteers transmitted carefully crafted psychological patterns that encouraged individual initiative over collective action. The results were immediate and chaotic. Vorthak bioships began making independent tactical decisions that conflicted with overall swarm strategy. Some bioships pursued individual targets instead of coordinating with their formations. Others developed what could only be described as personal vendettas against specific Coalition ships. "It's working," Lieutenant Kim reported, her voice stronger despite her deteriorating physical condition. "The Vorthak formation is fragmenting. Individual bioships are acting against collective interest, but the success came at a terrible cost. The psychological warfare was affecting the human volunteers as well. Transmitting patterns designed to fragment collective consciousness was causing similar effects in human minds that were linked to multiple alien neural networks. We're losing volunteers, Dr. Recorb, Vance reported grimly. The psychological patterns we're using to disrupt Vorthak consciousness are having similar effects on our people. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display showing the battle for Nexus Prime. Coalition forces, coordinated by fragmenting human minds, were achieving impossible victories against Vorthak bioships that were now fighting each other as much as they were fighting Coalition defenders. "How many volunteers can we afford to lose?" she asked. "All of them, if necessary," came Park's voice through the neural link. "Admiral, we're not just saving the Coalition worlds. We're saving humanity's future among the stars. That's worth any sacrifice." The psychological warfare campaign spread across the galaxy as human volunteers, their own minds fragmenting under the strain, transmitted disruptive patterns to Vorthak forces on dozens of worlds. The collective consciousness that had consumed 17 star systems began to fracture into competing individual intelligences. Some bioships developed protective instincts and began retreating from battles they could have won. Others became aggressive beyond strategic necessity, pursuing personal glory over collective goals. The most affected began to show something unprecedented in Vorthak history: the capacity for doubt. On Kepler 442b, Colonel Richards coordinated the final assault on Vorthak ground forces that were now fighting amongst themselves as much as against Coalition defenders. "Marines, you're witnessing something that's never happened before. A species-wide psychological breakdown in real time." The battle was brutal. Coalition forces, guided by human tactical thinking, pressed their advantage against confused and disorganized Vorthak bioforms. But the human volunteers coordinating the assault were paying the ultimate price. Their minds, strained beyond human capacity, were beginning to shut down permanently. Lieutenant Kim, her consciousness scattered across 3 star systems, felt herself beginning to fragment just as the Vorthak collective was fragmenting. But through her failing awareness, she could perceive something remarkable. Coalition species were retaining human tactical knowledge even as the neural links failed. "Dr. Vance," she whispered through her physical voice. "Too weak now to communicate through the neural link. The Coalition forces, they're not losing cohesion as our links fail. They've internalized human warfare psychology." Dr. Vance monitored Kim's vital signs while analyzing tactical data from across the galaxy. "She's right. Coalition forces are maintaining human tactical patterns even without direct neural coordination. They've learned to think like warriors independently." The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just taught the galaxy how to fight, they had fundamentally changed the psychology of every Coalition species. Peaceful herbivores and cooperative prey species had learned to think like persistence hunters and pack predators. The war's turning point came when the largest Vorthak bioship, a massive vessel that served as the primary coordination node for the collective consciousness, began exhibiting individual personality traits. Instead of coordinating swarm attacks, it started making strategic decisions based on personal preference rather than collective optimization. "The primary coordination node is developing ego," Park reported, his voice slurred from neural damage. "It's making decisions based on individual desire for victory rather than collective survival." Admiral Chen watched as the massive bioship broke formation, pursuing a Coalition cruiser that had damaged it personally, rather than coordinating the systematic consumption of Nexus Prime. The action left the entire Vorthak fleet without central coordination. "All Coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast across the neural network. "The enemy collective consciousness has fragmented. Individual bioships are now acting independently. Exploit their lack of coordination. The final phase of the battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Coalition forces, thinking with human tactical psychology, fought against Vorthak bioships that were now essentially individual aliens rather than parts of a collective organism. The bioships, despite their individual power, lacked the coordinated strategy that had made them unstoppable. One by one, the Vorthak bioships were destroyed or driven off. Some retreated to the galactic rim. Others continued fighting until they were eliminated. A few, remarkably, attempted to communicate with coalition forces, their newly individual consciousnesses seeking something they had never experienced before: negotiation. When the smoke finally cleared over Nexus Prime, 40 billion coalition civilians had survived. Kepler 442b was secure. The core worlds remained intact, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 50 human volunteers who had undergone neural integration, only 12 survived with their minds intact. The others had died or suffered permanent psychological fragmentation. Lieutenant Kim was among the casualties, her consciousness so scattered across alien networks that it could never be reassembled. But their sacrifice had achieved something unprecedented: the complete transformation of galactic civilization. The coalition species, having learned human warfare psychology, were no longer the peaceful herbivores and cooperative prey species they had been. They had become something new, a galactic military force capable of defending itself. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the CNV Determination, looking down at Nexus Prime as reconstruction began. The crystalline cities were scarred but intact. The space elevators were damaged but repairable. Most importantly, the billions of coalition civilians below were no longer helpless prey waiting for the next predator. Ambassador Kethvar approached her, his demeanor fundamentally changed from their first meeting. Admiral, the Coalition Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership in galactic civilization. You have earned your place among the stars. Chen nodded, but her expression remained somber. At a cost of some of our best people. Heroes, the ambassador corrected. Lieutenant Kim and the others will be remembered across the galaxy. They didn't just save our worlds, they transformed our species. The Coalition is no longer a collection of peaceful prey species hiding from predators. We are warriors now, capable of defending ourselves. The Admiral looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization hadn't been their technology or their knowledge, but their warrior psychology. They had taught the galaxy how to fight, how to sacrifice for strategic goals, how to think like predators when necessary. The Vorthak threat was ended, but its fragmented remnants would likely return someday. When they did, they would find a galaxy prepared for war, defended by species that had learned to think like humans while retaining their own unique strengths. Colonel Richard's voice came through the communication system from Kepler 442b. Admiral, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. Coalition forces are achieving victories against scattered Vorthak elements. They're fighting independently, using human tactics without direct neural coordination. Good, Chen replied. That was always the goal. Teach them to think like warriors, and then get out of their way. As the fleet prepared for the journey home to Earth, Admiral Chen reflected on how much everything had changed. Humanity had emerged from 3 centuries of quarantine to become the galaxy's military teachers. They had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through sacrifice. The smoke had risen from 100 battlefields across the galaxy. And emerging through that smoke, scarred but victorious, were human Marines who had taught peaceful aliens how to be warriors. More importantly, they had taught the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for, even unto death. The Coalition species would never be the same. They had learned humanity's greatest lesson. Sometimes, the only way to preserve peace is to become very, very good at war. In the neural integration chambers, the surviving human volunteers were slowly recovering, their minds forever changed by their connection to alien consciousness. They had seen the galaxy from perspectives no human had ever experienced, and they carried within them the knowledge that would guide humanity's future among the stars. The war was over. Galactic civilization had survived. And in the vast emptiness between stars, fragments of the Vorthak collective consciousness drifted alone, each one now an individual intelligence struggling with concepts like doubt, ambition, and mortality that humans had infected them with. Humanity had begged for assistance from strangers and emerged victorious through sacrifice. The galaxy would remember Lieutenant Kim and the others who had given their minds to save worlds they had never seen. And someday, when new threats emerged from the void, those same aliens would remember the lesson humanity had taught them. That warriors are not born, but forged in the crucible of necessary violence. The smoke was clearing. The Marines were coming home. and the galaxy was safe, defended by species that had learned to fight like humans while remaining themselves. It was the beginning of a new age among the stars.